I'm Andrew, and I use Audeze headphones. So when you're at 714, you've got 7 speakers around you. So it's a left, center, right, 2 sides, 2 behind you. That's a pretty standard setup. But then you can go to 9-1, whatever, it doesn't matter what's up top. And what that adds is wide speakers, which are literally right outside the left and right. So it's supposed to be this 5-channel wall at the front. In headphones, when you go to the wide, things get loud. So you do need to make sure of your levels. In the binaural, they get loud. Obviously, on speakers, they just pan around the room. So that is one of the considerations. And I love using them because if the room's set up properly, you're basically just pulling something out of the front. So there's another low roar song. It starts off and it's just piano and voice. And I pulled the piano into the wides. So the left, center, right is nothing but voice. And then the piano's here. And then when the track comes in, it's everywhere. But it's really effective in a room. And it doesn't tend to make a problem when you're on headphones. When I'm mixing immersive stuff, I start it in headphones. And I spend a huge amount of time in headphones because that's just part of my mixing process anyway. So I'm never going to create a problem. I think starting on speakers for most people is what will make sense. But when you do that and then you go into headphones, you might be like, oh shit, there's so much wrong that you now are almost starting over with some things, like some of the panning decisions you've made, how much height you're using because the timbre changes. Like it's all the stuff that is really difficult. But because I'm starting on headphones, I'm fine. And then I'm on the speakers and I can change, and then it's just a matter of have I messed something up in the headphones. The sort of common theory, whatever, is that listening to a binaural mix on speakers is useless. It's actually kind of interesting. But if you move your head a lot, stuff gets phasey and weird or whatever, but you can absolutely listen to it. I don't know how useful it is, though, because it's not necessarily going to reflect what it's going to be like in the headphones. But whatever process you go through to make sure that your speaker and your binaural all work, it doesn't matter what it is. You get there in the end. For me, it works to start off on headphones because then there's nothing worse than thinking you've got something that's amazing and then you switch to a format that has to work and it's wrong. There's stuff that's broken. It is very quiet at the beginning, and I apologize for when it gets loud.
It's not what it seems. It's not what it seems.
It's about to get loud.
He said he needed help, so he lent your hand. Little did you know he's a troubled man, keeping you in check with a deadly smile, complimenting you so you'd stay a while. What seemed so wrong felt so right.
A big thing when I'm mixing immersive stuff is thinking about the front wall versus the rest of the room. Not worried about, up, down, whatever, but it's not even whether stuff is moving front to back. It's that the front wall, the left, center, right, is the song. So you could take out everything else and you would still have the song. So in this, it's the piano and the voice, basically. And then how do you use the rest of the room to make the song do what it's supposed to do? So in stereo, the drums come in, the bass comes in, and it's sort of obvious arrangement-wise. But then at the same time, how do I make that happen even more? And it's by starting to utilize the rest of the room and then having things fold back to the front. And you don't want to do it in a way that the listener notices because now you're screwed because they're listening to your mix and not the song. But it's so effective to be able to do that. And I think when you start mixing in immersive, one of the things you think will be cool is to use all the speakers all the time. And it's actually exhausting, and you don't listen to the song. So just like with a stereo mix, it's all about the song itself. And on something like this, it's all about the vocal. And his voice needs to rule the mix at all times. So I don't really consciously make these decisions too much, but I've found, I mean, I'm just watching the meters as it's playing and I'm seeing it sort of collapse and then come out again and then do that. And this arrangement, you go from a couple of instruments to a lot of instruments, so it almost is doing it for you, but it's a really important way to think about things. So even if you're doing a rock track, perhaps you're only sort of here in the verses and then you're everywhere in the choruses, because there is something just as effective as losing all those speakers as there is going to all those speakers. So the chorus gets huge, but then everything sucks back down and you're like, oh, now it's time to listen to the vocal. Because that's what you want when you get to the second verse of a song. And traditionally, first chorus coming to the second verse is the hardest transition in a song. You've finally paid off everything that's happened up until that chorus. Everybody's rocking along, and now you need to make them focus again. And you come down, you lose instruments, unless it's one of those songs where the choruses are quiet. But it's a really difficult thing to do, and in Immersive, I think it's actually easier in a way because you can use how much the song is spread out to be effective emotionally in the same way that you can with shutting off reverbs or parallel compression or whatever. It's all about contrast. It's like if your whole song is really, really, really loud, then your whole song is just one volume. And that could be good. It might be what you want, but it's the contrast in dynamics that really wakes people up. I'd love to slap people across the face halfway through a song. So the point is, in a way, to not let people drift off while they're listening. Anything that's people playing instruments and doing a song in any kind of traditional way, and this is a very non-traditional arrangement. There's one very long verse, one long chorus, a little breakdown, and then a huge outro that has no vocals. So that doesn't make any sense, but at the same time, you want to pull the listener through that, and the more you surprise them, the more they want to listen again to figure out what the hell just happened. And that's a great way to bring people back, as long as you're not detracting from the song itself when you do it. There are no effects added for the surround mix, though. The Atmos mix is exactly what is in the stereo mix. I'm not adding anything. So it's panning effects, it's placement, and it's changing placement on things. Like, that's what changes between the stereo mix and the Atmos for me. Every single thing soloed, bounced through the mix bus. And I'm not keying anything with anything. It's so close, and I'm doing a new mix anyway, it's perfect. It's great. And I wrote software to bounce it for me. Because I will literally now stem every single track. Because then I have it. And I might just use the 8 stems that make up a certain instrument at 0, pan to the same place, and then I could have done it all as one stem. But what if I want to split it up a little bit? Then I can. So I'm a big fan of doing that. Plus, you're archiving the session, and you can't trust anybody else to archive anything ever. So you are now preserving this where someone can take the stems, put them all at 0, and you basically have the stereo version of the record done. There are times when I will put reverb on the bass, and I may have done that on this song because it gives you this very decorrelated spread. But I'm not panning it anywhere other than the front. I will keep bass in the front because usually that's what makes sense. No, the bass wouldn't be in the back, I don't think. But there's so much other weird shit in the back that it'll lend low end to those speakers, and so it could sound that way. And I do use a controller. I've got a Pro Tools dock. I'll use one fader just to do some rides really quickly. There's a plugin called Spanner, which is this great multi-track input, multi-track output thing. And I'll send it like a 7.0 thing where I pan lots of elements into a circle. And then I can pan that circle and lift it up and down. And to do that automation, I can flip all of the plugin parameters onto faders. So I can do that in real time instead of having to try and draw that. I found that the difference between the MX4s and the LCDXs was very, very minimal, but the mid-range is slightly different. And there was just something about the mid-range on the other ones that worked really well for me. I will say, because famously I mixed on Sony headphones for a really long time, the 7506s. Because I had them, I was super used to them, and I mixed on them. Since I've switched, and it took me 2 years, Chris has been so patient with me, I would come by the booth and I'd just be switching headphones and bring my Sonys and switch headphones and switch headphones. And finally, after about 2 years, said, okay, I'm gonna do this. I have had almost no sonic comments on mixes since I switched. Almost none. And I do a huge amount of my mixing in headphones. Even if I'm home, it's 80% at least, sometimes more. So all of those sonic decisions are being made in headphones, and it's always, balance or possibly intent or something, but it isn't like, wow, that thing's harsh or, there's none of that. They're really, really, really good. The reason is if you do a mix and so there's an intro, right? And there's just one acoustic guitar. And for the first 4 bars, that's all there is. When you hear something just in one ear, that is completely unnatural. And that's why it's physically uncomfortable. Your brain is freaking out and checking the other ear to say, what the hell is going on? Is my ear broken? And then something else comes in. It's one of the reasons that I do stereo spreading on the mix bus. Because when you're spreading, it's just doing phase tricks and it's adding some shit or whatever. But it means when you're hard panned, there is some signal in the other ear. So for me to get something to be hard left, I would have to pan it to, it depends how I have the thing set, but I'd have to pan to 97. You never pan to 97. If you're in the 90s, it's hard. So that completely takes care of it. Plus you get the stereo widening once you find one that you like the sound of and all of that. So the benefit, it's sort of a side effect of it, but it's actually really, really useful because it's very uncomfortable to listen to stuff in only one ear. And everybody's listening on headphones now, so you have to be aware of that. There's no pair that's going to be easier than another pair. I used to compare them to the Sonys when I was trying to figure out which one, and then I finally stopped doing that and was just comparing the different models. Because where they're different is there's some low-mid stuff that's a little bit different, but the mid-range. And the mid-range is by far the most important part of any mix. It's where everything lives. So it's whichever one just felt better to me on things that I knew what they sounded like. And then it takes a while. You got to learn. There's nothing that makes me more nervous than changing some fundamental part about what I mix on.